where we're sort of seeing everything on it, right? So we're seeing some lats and serratus, and we're seeing the pec major up on top. We see the rectus abdominis. We peel it away a little bit here on the left. We can see some of the transverse abdominis deep, as if it was peeled away. We can see the obliques and internal obliques down low. And we get an idea of how it's just this incredible masterpiece. I think sort of like this art piece from Kelly Anderson. It's so beautiful when we think of all the different fibers and contractile directions that are laid on top of our skeleton that also moves. So every time that I change the moment arm or the relationship of a joint in the spine, it has to adjust neuromuscularly and fascially to that load. Some of the tone and resistance is fascial elasticity. Some of it is underlying tone that is in the muscles naturally in a healthy body. And what we want to be careful of doing is over-recruiting or over-cueing something that is now getting in the way of a very natural adaptation system in our body to movement. Movement is the thing that sort of changes things. And I'll finish up with this, and I'd like to hear some thoughts from Shelly on sort of this idea, what comes to her mind as she looks at this picture in cueing core control and cueing intra-abdominal pressured activity. When I think of this idea of load response, and how we're so blessed in the Pilates community to have the ability to modify and manipulate load. And we can lay that on top of movement. So Richardson and Hodges' study was done in a static position. Why? Because we can't do needle EMG in moving parts of the body. So the report that we have from there, which is a fantastic study back in '96, it still holds water, is that the muscle relationships was based on a statically neutral spine with a moving arm. The shoulder was going into flexion, abduction, and extension. So what would happen if the spine was in 10 degrees of flexion or a rotation or a combined movement like a golf swing? How would that change this neuromuscular response to load? And I don't think we have the scientific data because we can't stick needles in people while they're moving, but we can certainly extrapolate. And this is where I'd like to go and sort of hear even creatively what Shelly is as a master Pilates teacher, how she sees a picture like this. What does it make you think of as far as trying to cue core control with isolated muscle contraction?
It makes me crazy because I just can't do it anymore. I mean, I really, I just can't go that way. And so many questions. I was looking over to, again, kind of scroll through some of the questions that were asked. And there were a lot of questions based around, well, if you don't cue navel to spine, or if you're no longer saying scoop or hollow or any of the variety of different cues there are for, we've heard over the years, well, what's a good cue then? So what is a good cue? And it seems to me it's a little bit backwards. I don't know what a good cue is because I don't know what you want out of the movement. A good cue for doing a side plank moving into star in terms of, from the shoulders to the pelvis is going to be a very different good cue than a rollover or corkscrew or something where there's mobility. So I think we need to change our thinking a little bit to think what is, and Brent, you hear Brent talk about this all the time. What is the desired outcome? What do you want out of this movement? Do you want more mobility? Do you want less mobility? Do you want more control? What do you want? And then you can create a scenario. And I go back to imagery because it tends to be a little bit more of a system, like a full body and mind cue than, just again, a muscle cue. But sometimes we do like to cue the skeleton in terms of alignment and relationships of parts to other parts. So I would say, know what you want. Even if you're not quite, you don't get it right the first time. Hardly any of us are right the first time, but what do you want? And what type of information can you give somebody to get them closer to being able to do that? And then the next part that I think is so important, and I've been trying to incorporate this more and more into my own classes that I'm teaching and when I'm teaching the education courses, is, again, this idea of how do I give the information to someone so that they can, with my help, be successful, whatever that means. And then my help goes away over time and their internal awareness is heightened over time. So, they have to have better proprioception, better awareness of where their body is in space. Should it be moving more? Should it be moving less? All of these things. So those are kind of some of the things that I think of as far as, what are the good cues? Because there were so many questions about that, is figure out what you want. Look at the body in front of you, and then give that person information to move them closer to being able to do the activity that you want.